Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Impact and Coffee. Happy July 21st. This is our last Impact and Coffee of the month of July, and we're happy that everyone's here. Hopefully not staying too warm. It's pretty hot outside. I'm Robert Nelson. I'm the program manager for Pivotal New Mexico, and my co-host is always the lovely Mariah Harrison. Hi, Mariah.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
For those who've never joined Impact and Coffee before, Impact and Coffee is a welcoming conversation to help us build community within the nonprofit community and the broader community as a whole. And today is Gratitude Tuesday. So, Mariah, is there anything you're grateful for specifically in life or in work?
You guys remember this Yelp mug?
Oh my.
This is from one of our special events, and I'm a Gratitude today for homemade coffee with steamed milk. That's the simple things.
Screenshot that. We'll text Howie.
Right.
Also, if anyone has anything they want to share that they're grateful for on Gratitude Tuesday, please do so in the chat, and we will start to get going around some of our programming. Just a heads up, everyone is on mute, and so if you're not on mute, make sure that you are if you're not a panelist. And we'll try to lift up any questions in the chat if possible. So we'll start with, I know we're doing really quick, but is there anything else you want to add, Mariah?
Yeah, so we always encourage people to do gratitude, as you said, and then Jessie posted a link for the ABQ Impactors page, and that's always something you can add to even after this is over if you have events or announcements. And then as we're chatting, feel free to add things to the chat like questions and announcements and resources and your contact information if you want to connect with anybody. Thank you. Oh, and we keep forgetting to mention coffee because the other half of this, we usually support a local coffee something or another. So I want to say, if you want to shout out any of your favorite coffee shops today, why not?
Good call, Mariah. Thank you. Why don't we just go ahead and get started with introductions? We'll go a little bit longer because we're still waiting on one more person, but that's okay. We'll start with Jessie. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Calero, and I am with Mandy's Farm. Mandy's Farm is a nonprofit organization that supports adults with developmental disabilities, and we're a little bit unique in that we do quite a bit of that through agriculture, gardening, animal husbandry, things like that. I'm the development director there, and I've been with the organization for almost 10 years, which makes me feel very, very old right now. And I started there when I was in college, just an entry-level position, and kind of fell in love with the work. And they cannot get rid of me at this point. And I guess that's pretty much who I am and what I'm up to. But it's great to be here and to talk to you all.
Thanks, Jessie. And good for now. Christina, welcome to Impact and Coffee, and thanks for being here. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry about the sunlight weird thing that'll pass in a couple minutes. I'm Christina Keibler, and I'm the engagement director of the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association. And we're a nonprofit that was founded in 1994, and the original goal was to assist farmers and farmers markets and farm stands and other local food outlets to market their produce to people in the state of New Mexico. Since that time, we've grown to a multi-leveled organization. We have a full-time staff of about 7 people, and we conduct things like food access. We run the Double Up Food Bucks program, which you may have heard of at this point, hopefully, where SNAP recipients get $1 for $1 match to buy locally grown fresh fruits and vegetables in the state. We also conduct farmer trainings that allow New Mexican farmers to be licensed to sell their produce to New Mexican schools. We provide a lot of education to public health workers, general consumers with healthier recipes, and we just launched last August a statewide healthy food text program called Good Food NM, which Michael Green is the coordinator of and manages it. So we have our fingers in a lot of different places, but all of them are focused on increasing the awareness of people for New Mexico grown fruits and vegetables and getting people to support their local economy by buying local food.
That's awesome. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Excuse my throat. It's a little allergies. I'll get it this morning. When we start with our first question and dive right in, we know the last 4 months have been extraordinarily challenging for a lot of folks, a lot of organizations. Can you talk about some of those challenges and what you've done to overcome them over the last few times, or just have to pivot? Excuse my use of my language or my organizational language. Thanks, Jessie. We'll start with you.
So it's definitely been an interesting time. Having been with the organization for so long, I've seen quite a bit of change and having to adapt, but this is definitely the most difficult time I've encountered. We kind of have an interesting challenge as an organization because we provide services and have a focus in a couple of different areas. So our primary mission is to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and so much of the work that we do with them is considered essential, especially our in-home services. And those services are really a lifeline for the people we support. That's making sure they get their medications, making sure they have access to food, housing, have everything that they need to go about their day. But they are under a stay-at-home order that's much stricter than the rest of the community. They are not allowed to have any visitors outside of direct caregivers. So many of our clients have not seen family or friends or left their homes since March. And so a lot of our work has been focused on making sure that people's mental health is taken care of, because that can be very difficult, especially when maybe your disability makes understanding what's going on more difficult and navigating change incredibly, incredibly difficult. So we've been very focused on that. A lot of our work that was very educational based and group based has had to move online. And so that's been unique in navigating how do we make sure that the people that we support have access to the internet, have access to technology so that they can get online and then have the support that they need if they've never navigated something like Zoom before, which I think a lot of us have had to adapt to. How do we make sure that we help them get on those platforms and participate? And so that has been very difficult. Some of our largest programs are still suspended and probably will be suspended until there is a vaccine in place. And so there are a lot of individuals we support who are going through a grieving process of not being able to see friends, not being able to participate in their normal routines, and not really having an end date. A lot of times providing some sort of structure of this will happen at this time, and then this is what's coming next, and this is what follows. That is what helps people adapt to change. And obviously in this situation, we have almost none of that. So we, as an organization, luckily we were able to access PPP. And so that gave us a little bit of a safety net. But about 25% of our workforce was going without hours. And so we had been providing retention pay, providing about 75% of their average wages, whether they were working or not, and then providing a differential for caregivers who were having to leave their homes despite the stay-at-home order. And that was initially about $2 an hour, and then we were able to bump that up to $4 an hour. Unfortunately, the funding sources that were paying for that ran out as of June 30th. And so we were forced to lay off about 25% of our workforce in the first week of July. We have some small whisperings from some of our funding sources that we might be able to hire those people back if some Medicaid funding becomes available again. So we're hopeful that we can, bring our workforce back and retain those employees. But that's really kind of contingent on federal and state decisions. the one of the really great things that I want to highlight is that Conalma Health Foundation did provide us with a significant grant to help continue paying those differential wages to our caregivers. And so that has been really meaningful. So those are some of the unique challenges. In terms of agriculture, one of our biggest challenges right now is that we rely heavily on volunteers, and that's our biggest source of community engagement. People come in, they want to get dirty, they want to learn about agriculture, they want to interact with our animals, they want to build skills in growing. And in a normal summer season, we would have anywhere from 300 to 600 community members engaging in the space, learning, and supporting our growing programs. And of course, right now we are at 0 volunteers. And so we are navigating continuing to grow food with just 2 part-time staff. We have a little bit of support through the AgriBility program that allows us to access interns from UNM. And so we have a handful of those guys who are now assisting the program. And we've, of course, adapted to social distancing, hand washing, mask wearing, all of those things that can help keep those people safe as they interact. But probably the most difficult situation is losing those volunteers because, you know, we need to continue growing food. The people that we support, we want to make sure they have access to locally grown food. And we also want to share our excess with other local nonprofits and community members experiencing food insecurity. And so having a lack of manpower is something we have not fully figured out how to adapt to. It's been kind of taking it day by day and tackling the most urgent needs first. But you know, it's a world where we're learning to be leaner. We're learning to be very mindful about how we allocate our resources. And I think we're learning a lot as an organization about what programs are most important and how we can continue to have those thrive even when funding is relatively scarce. So I think we're learning a lot and we'll be an even stronger organization at the end of this.
Thanks for sharing that, Jessie. I appreciate it. It's, yeah, 25% of the workforce. That's pretty hard. And then having to deal with growing food with people and employees. Thank you. And hopefully we can think about like different ways that we can approach that so we can help and support you with as a lean organization. Christina, can you talk a little bit about your challenges?
Absolutely. We basically, as soon as March started and everything kind of started to, you know, collide, our organization got really, really, really busy. You know, we were putting in 14-hour days, almost 7 days a week, feeling really overwhelmed. And the reason for that is, you know, we were working directly with the governor's office to make sure that farmers markets and farm stands were formally deemed essential businesses, which took a lot of work. You know, it's not so much that people disagreed with it. It's just that typically, you know, local agriculture, when you look at it from a budgetary standpoint, is pretty much a drop in the bucket compared to other businesses in the state of New Mexico. So, you know, we as an organization have to work almost doubly hard to kind of get noticed because of that. But we did work with the governor's office, and we did get farmers markets and farm stands formally deemed essential businesses, which was really important for us to be able to do that. And the reason why we worked so hard is because we knew that unless we were able to get that done, that a lot of communities would just consider farmers markets like entertainment gatherings and not allow them to open, but they're very important food sources. And as we have since discovered, the interest in buying local food by New Mexican citizens has skyrocketed, simply because fewer people are touching the food. You know, it's more local, there's less potential for contamination. You know, people can see the farmers, because when they go to the farmers markets or farm stands, they are wearing masks, they are wearing gloves, food is pre-bagged. And we also worked to create those guidelines for the local food shopping outlets in the state to make sure that when people went to markets, they felt safe. So we created those guidelines and disseminated them through the state to our farmer and farmers market and farm stand members and CSAs as well, and worked with them to make sure they had things like hand washing stations. And on more than one occasion, we had to directly step in with city governments who were refusing to allow farmers markets to open, to encourage them to do so, and say, yes, they are essential businesses. But even though they were formally deemed by the governor's office as being essential, and that wasn't necessarily good enough for, some cities in the state. So, just the amount of work to step in and advocate for those markets to make sure they could open. It took a lot of time and convincing to do that. And that's on top of spring, which is normally our busiest time anyway. So we really went, obviously none of us have been in this position before, but it was something that, we really stepped up and really got a lot done. And the farmers market community and the CSAs, which is community supported agriculture. If you're not familiar with the CSA, it's a subscription service to a farm. The interest has really increased a lot, which also has increased our workload in a good way, because it means we're interacting more with the public and educating them about the benefits of local food. And we continue to work with leaders and individual communities and convince them that, farmers markets and farm stands are a good thing. One of the issues we're coming up against now that we're assisting market managers with in the state is that certain market managers have been threatened by individuals who refuse to wear masks. A couple of them have been threatened with guns. Asserting their right to be at the market without a mask. And, farmers markets and farm stands are basically individual businesses, and they're independently operated. So they can do, the market manager can do whatever they want, but it's been, stressful for the local food community to try to protect themselves and yet also serve their communities. So it's been a time of, learning. There's no doubt about that, but also we're dealing with things that we've never had to deal with before, like firearms and police and things like that. So in addition to that, the community outreach that we usually partake in has changed a little bit, where, we're focusing on things like educating about the safety of shopping locally, the benefits of doing so, the benefits of locally grown food, even when we're not dealing with the pandemic. And we are seeing increased interest in local food, but at the same time, people don't want to shop at a crowded market. So helping markets develop things like pickup options and CSAs delivering their food. I mean, all these things, all these changes are coming at us so quickly. And, one of my tasks right now is to try to figure out which of those services are going to remain after the pandemic ends. And, none of us really know for sure when that will be. So keeping an eye on future permanent changes that will take place because of what we're experiencing now, and the impacts that will have on local food and consumer outreach, and farmer education and all that, is something we need to start addressing at this time period. Other things that we have been working through over the past several months is just ensuring that our Double Up Food Bucks program remains at the forefront, especially as more people are in need of SNAP. Making sure that our training is transferred to our online format, which, when you're used to training farmers on actual farms, making that transition has some serious growing pains, but it's something that we're really working through in cooperation with the Extension Service. So it's been a very dynamic time for the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association, and it's something that, I think we'll continue to see the impacts of, probably for a couple of years as things settle out and shift continues to happen, and who knows what's going to happen. So we've been very fortunate that we haven't had to lay anyone off. If anything, we've had to hire a couple more people just because we've been so hammered with work that we not sure how to get it all done sometimes.
Thanks, Christina. I appreciate that. It's just so much to unpack there, but knowing that every organization has different challenges is also just as important too. I'm going to kick it over to Mariah to ask her next question.
I would definitely agree that there's a lot to unpack, and that's one of the reasons I love that we record this so I can go back and listen to all the details. So our follow-up question to that idea of what have you been challenged by is how have you been addressing some of those challenges with maybe new or enhanced partnerships? You did mention that you had sort of in general been working with different ways of outreach, and you've hired new people, and you're working with the governor's office, and there are volunteer shortages. So how have you been addressing these with other entities around town to sort of accomplish what you need to get done during the stressful time? And Jessie, we'll go back to you to talk about partnerships.
It's definitely been an opportunity to connect with similar organizations and find out what they are doing. I feel like there's a heightened dialogue that has not happened before to this extent, I think, where people are sharing successes, people are sharing what's not going well, what's working, what's not working. And so we've been able to lean on disability organizations and find out what they are doing and what's happening in their programs, and also a lot of local food growing partners and organizations that we know need food more than ever. We've had a really great dialogue with Food is Free Albuquerque. And so that's, if you guys aren't familiar, that's a great resource for sharing food, whether you are an organization or an individual. For example, I have a huge plum tree in my yard, and I was recently able to donate 40 pounds of plums to Food is Free Albuquerque, which I could never have eaten with just myself or my son. And even canning, that would have been a pretty overwhelming amount. And so things like when we as an organization have a ton of eggs, because we've got chickens that they're laying no matter what's going on in the world, sharing those types of resources with the community. And in turn, so many organizations, local businesses, and individuals have reached out to us to share their resources. One of the things that I didn't anticipate being an issue, but became an issue very quickly, was as an organization, some of the things that people buy in a pandemic, we use on a daily basis. So hand sanitizer, gloves, baby wipes, things like that, we use to provide personal care and health care, every single day, pandemic or no pandemic. And so shortly after things shut down, people were panicking and buying all of these products. And we've seen, price gouging happening. We've seen scarcity occurring. And so we were a little panicked because this is stuff we rely on to deliver services safely and protect our clients and staff. And there were several local organizations that, we put a call online and they said, hey, we have this in stock, or we're going to run to Costco and see what we can find. And they were able to bring those things to us. They were even able to collect things like canned goods, puzzles, things like that to entertain people while they're staying at home and they're not having anything to do. And we were really grateful for that. And people who said, what do you need for your agriculture programs? Do you need money? Do you need me to build raised beds? What can we do? The Albuquerque Community Foundation was able to unrestrict a grant that they provided for our agriculture program. So, our plans to sort of expand agriculture, we had to say, let's just sustain what we have during this time, which I think was the best move for our organization, just with the inability to utilize volunteers. And so having that leeway with that funding that ACF provided was huge for us, and allowed us to make sure that agriculture staff were given what they needed immediately rather than what we had planned, 6 months ago. So I think it's been really interesting to see how innovative everyone in the community has been, and to see how a lot of the formality of collaboration has kind of been stripped away. And it's very much just, phone calls. Hey, what's going on with you? What do you need? Sending emails. Can you use this? And it's a lot less like, we need you to fill out a form, and we need, all of this stuff, that sort of nonprofit bureaucracy that slows things down. So I feel like it's become more authentic in terms of how collaboration is occurring, which I think is exciting, and I hope continues. I hope that continues in terms of partnerships, in terms of funding. I think sometimes we try to formalize things to a degree that it becomes so laborious that the collaboration is no longer even meaningful or helpful. So I'm excited to see that trend.
Thank you for making a point of that. I totally agree. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to raise the question of partnerships, because I think the authenticity is really there when you're seeing something so up close and so acute that you just want to reach out. And I'm glad you're experiencing that. Lots of good stuff. Goodness. Okay, Christina, I'd love to hear more about some specifics that you're doing right now with partners.
Okay. Well, the NMFMA has always focused on partnerships. I mean, that's one of the main ways that we get work done, and partners are one of the main people that we serve beyond our direct membership. So that aspect hasn't changed so much. I mean, I could list all of our partners, but they run from government agencies all the way down to local food banks and small local health clinics. Anyone around the state who's focused on health in any way, health improvement or food insecurity, we basically partner with in a variety of ways, with training or food access programs, general support, and that continues. I mean, I will say that since the pandemic, our relation, like how we relate to each other, has shifted a little bit more. I mean, people are in the work that we do, and our partners were also in reactive mode because of the pandemic, that like when we get on Zoom calls, there's a subtle difference in how we talk to each other. It's a little difficult to explain, but there's just a little more, I wouldn't say an enhanced trust, but everyone's just so overwhelmed. It's like, thank you so much for handling this for me, because there's no way I can do it. It's just this more like a heavier reliance perhaps, or a greater ability to let go of a certain amount of control and let another partner take it on because they might be better suited for a certain task. So I will say that has changed, and that's been nice, because a lot of the formality and separateness of partnerships has dissolved a little bit, where now we're just all in this together kind of mode. And the work that we have done with our partners has basically been the same as what we've always done. It's just been more focused on troubleshooting, general support if a partner can't, if they have a problem getting masks and gloves, which is one thing that we helped our farmers markets with, because they, getting them approved as essential business is one thing, but they still got to have the masks and gloves, and if they can't get them, it doesn't matter if they're deemed essential businesses or not. So, we were scrambling to get them this kind of supplies that Jessie referred to, and that was a challenge, especially when people are hoarding it that don't really need it. So that aspect was, we've been doing a lot of that as well. But one of the things that we really focused on, and which ended up being I wouldn't say a happy accident, but it was just a timing thing. Last fall, we unveiled this texting program that I referred to earlier in the introduction, Good Food NM. And it's a statewide texting program focused on health and local food. Partners around the state include Food Depot, Roadrunner Food Bank, the farmers markets and farm stands in the state. We're piloting with the Santa Fe public school system now, with the greater goal of getting all the schools in the state on the program, and a variety of other partners. Or New Mexico National Guard is a partner, and we send out a couple texts a week to individual subscribers. It's a program that is each partner can have their own audience, so they can communicate directly with their own constituents or their own clients with specific messaging. And again, Michael is the manager for that, but that's been really increased in, I guess, popularity in a way, as especially with partners who need or want to get messages to constituents of a subtle nature that they used to be able to do face-to-face, which they can't do anymore. There's some limitations to it. They need to give us time enough to get messaging to us so we can translate it into Spanish, because it does go out in English. There are English subscribers and Spanish subscribers, but it still allows an enhanced communication, between partners and their clients. So that's something that, we were lucky to start that last August, and it's just happens to be really benefiting our partners now, just by happenstance. And that's something that we're looking to grow. So if you're interested in partaking in that, I encourage you to contact Michael, who's a regularly involved in this group. So I think that's, I don't know. It's been kind of nuts. That's all I'm going to say.
You're here from all of us, a little nuts. And thank you so much for all of that. It's just so much. And so both of you and Michael, if you have any specifics you want to add to the chat about how people can be working with you or how you're looking for more assistance with particular partnerships or anything like that, feel free to do it there, and also in the ABQ Impactors Facebook page. I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Robert for our third question, and let Sephora into our group. And thank you both very much.
Thanks, Mariah. Thanks for that. Both for those are really great responses around collaboration. And so our next question is a bit of a three-part question. So Jessie, you mentioned you all applied for PPP and got it. Can you talk a little bit about, could you all talk about if you'd applied for any SBA or PPP funding, what your experiences were? And then could you talk a little bit about how, in your opinion, how funders, whether it's federal government or even foundations, can be more responsive in this moment? There are a lot of different funders out there that are, working to double their payout and be more responsive, but there's still a little bit more advocacy work to do on that front. And so we're just wondering what your experiences are around the SBA and the PPP, and just what you think funders can be doing to be more responsive to your organizational needs and ultimately your community's needs. And we'll start with Jessie.
So like I said, we were able to access PPP, which was a huge lifesaver for our organization. The programs that have been suspended for us were a large source of revenue for kind of keeping our entire organization going. And so while we have a lot of diverse funding, that to accommodate, tens of thousands of dollars being lost on a monthly basis in just the drop of a hat was impossible without PPP. It has been kind of an anxiety-inducing process because guidelines change quickly. We still aren't really certain how much of that will be forgiven, what the forgiveness process looks like. We had some hiccups with applying. You know, we were told apply with this bank, and then that bank said, no, you need to apply with this bank. And so we were honestly very surprised we got it. We were very concerned that we would not receive any funding, just because as people started applying, people were saying, oh, money's running out because so many people are needing to access this funding. And so it was a very anxiety-inducing process, but we're very grateful that we were able to access that. We were also able to access a specific type of funding through Medicaid called Appendix K, and that is the funding that also ran out on June 30th, but may, fingers crossed, be renewed later this month, hopefully. And so that was something that we had access to as a disability provider that a lot of organizations were not able to take advantage of. So we were very grateful for that, even though, again, that was another program where guidelines were very vague, and we're still navigating as an organization how to make sure we're very carefully using those funds so that there's no need to repay any of that later. In terms of organizations that provide funding, foundations, things of that nature, we were very surprised, like I mentioned with the Albuquerque Community Foundation, receiving funding that was going to be restricted, that was unrestricted. And that was incredibly helpful to us, because many of the programs that we had planned 6 months ago, we don't know what that will look like even a year from now. A lot of the innovative stuff we're doing has had to change dramatically to adapt to a COVID positive world. So much of our work is so community based, so interaction based. We've had to rethink how to deliver those same services online or in, hopefully eventually, very, very small groups. So that flexibility that grant providers have offered has been important, and I hope that continues, because nonprofits know where the money needs to go most, and we know how to deliver services, and we can measure outcomes and talk about the impact of funding without such strict funding requirements, and so I hope that continues. We've also had a couple of emergency grants come in. We were able to access I think 2 different $5,000 emergency grants, and then one grant from Conalma Foundation that helped with some of that enhanced differentials for employees who are working, who are still reporting to work during the midst of a pandemic. And those have been huge for our organization. We hope that foundations will really consider increasing payouts. We've seen the stock market impact those organizations, but that immediate, we all say we're saving for a rainy day. This is the rainy day, and that immediate funding will, keep people afloat, keep our community strong until we are able to recover. I'm a big fan of Vu Lee and his newsletter, Nonprofit AF. And he's been talking a lot about how we need to kind of drop some of the old tropes of the nonprofit world and really focus on how can we create change and create safety nets and support people right now, because this is the rainy day that we're always perpetually talking about, and it's time to release funding to the greatest degree possible to keep people safe, alive, and get those basic needs met.
Thanks, Jessie. Snaps to that. So double the payout. And thanks for lifting up Vu Lee's words too. I was just reading his article on just how he's feeling, and it's okay, okay to be.
That made me cry, that article, because it's so how the nonprofit world feels right now. It feels very bleak sometimes.
Especially in the wake of losing John Lewis this last weekend. I think you know, it was really sad to see his loss. But you know, the one thing that he kept on saying, even in March, was, "I'm never going to give up." So here we are. Christina, can you talk a little bit about whether or not you applied for SBA or PPP funding, what your experiences were with that, and what you would like to see other funders do to be more responsive for our community's needs?
I'm happy to do that. We have not had to apply for any funding. Our funding has already been very solid, but we have provided funds in the state. So we have been a funder instead of a fundee. We had our first round of grants that were in May, I think, and they're basically called COVID relief grants. Some of the federal grants that were going out, you know, it was pretty clear early on that they were not going to be given to small farmers in New Mexico. So we decided to just bypass that whole nonsense and provide our own grants in the state to farmers, and also people who are interested in collaborative projects. You know, we did not have any restrictions on the work. You know, basically we just wanted people to, you know, write in, say what the grant was going to be used for, even if it was something like, you know, pay staff or whatever it was. You know, our view was, you know, these are needed funds, so we're going to give as much as we can. You know, we had like a week deadline, you know, for the first round, which was open to, it's always open to anyone in the state, you know, farmer or some sort of collaborative agricultural type of endeavor. And I think we had enough money to fund maybe 20 grants, and within a couple of days we had 150 applications. And it was very overwhelming. Our chief operating officer, financial person, I mean, she was literally in tears just because of all the need that was out there. And even though, I mean, we were supplying, you know, I think we ended up giving out like 15 grants between $500 and $1,000 for, you know, it was almost $100,000, you know, that we gave out. It, you know, it felt like a drop in the bucket to what the need was. So we, in response to that, we ended up getting more money. You know, a lot of it came from the Thornburg Foundation to fund a second round of grants, which were in June. The deadline was in June. And this second round was for collaborative projects. You know, we felt it was a better way to spread the money around that we did have to give. And we awarded those, and I think we're still in the process of kind of getting approval to, you know, kind of advertise who the winners were. You know, they have to sign an agreement and whatnot, but, you know, and we're still looking for ways to get money so we can provide funds to people who write grants. You know, we're very loose. Basically, you just have to fill out a pretty easy application, and then, you know, all we ask in return is that, you know, at the end of the year, you provide some sort of update about what you did, you know, with the money. And a lot of that is, you know, for our own purposes, so we know the kinds of things that people need money for, you know, and also, you know, we feel like, you know, people should provide some sort of results, you know, when they get the funds. But other than that, you know, we basically just, I mean, it was a very difficult, you know, there's committees of people that go through all the applications, and, you know, it's heart-wrenching, you know, when you have to reject, you know, 80% just because there's not enough money. You know, but we continue to work to try to get more, you know, to kind of meet the need as much as we can. But our goal as a funder is to eliminate as much BS as possible, to make it as easy as possible for people to get access to the money. But we're fortunate that our funding for our own organization has been solid enough that we haven't had to ask for any. You know, we've been able to give some. And for that, we're grateful. We just wish we could give more.
Thanks, Christina. I appreciate that. This is a very minor question, but like, will either of you consider applying for the Small Business Recovery Act money that's coming through the state, like on August 3rd? The application opens on August 3rd. I just checked the MFA website. So I think that's the $400 million recovery stimulus stuff. That's the governor assigned.
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, we're our executive director is the person who writes all of our grants, and she's like a savant when it comes to grant writing. And I haven't heard her talk about that. And we have so much other stuff that we're doing that we're pretty much at capacity in terms of what we can take on.
We're always looking for other sources of funding, especially to support food growing and to make sure that the residents that we're supporting are healthy and safe. So we definitely look at everything that comes across our table. So we'll probably be pursuing that. We're just trying to diversify things as much as possible, so that we can continue to do what we're doing.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it. I'll kick it over to Mariah to ask for our next question.
So we mentioned a little bit briefly about some things that we've already seen that have been changing that we like, but funding sort of dynamics and partnership dynamics. But let's also talk openly and honestly about some of the inequities that this pandemic has exposed in our communities and in our neighborhoods and our larger society. So if the two of you could talk about some of what you've seen with these exposures and how you'd like to see things change moving forward when we're talking about just how can we address those inequities and do better moving forward. And if you have ideas on how people can work with you on to make some of these changes and address these challenges, that's helpful too. And then I just noticed the time also, we've had one more question after this. So just keep in mind, we'll try to wrap up by 10. And Jessie, go for it.
I think it's been interesting to see sort of a societal conversation happening around inequity. And I think as a disability organization, it's really important that we look at intersectionality and think about how racial issues don't occur in a vacuum. And so while we are a disability organization, a lot of the movements that are happening that are highlighting racial disparities in our country, those are directly in line with our mission, because white people are not the only ones with disabilities. And while that tends to be the visual and the narrative, I think that it's exciting to see other voices and other faces really highlighted in this movement. There are some really, really cool people on Instagram who are Black, queer, disabled, people in our community who are doing some incredible advocacy. I think especially looking at police violence and how much more likely a person with a disability is to encounter police violence, especially if they are a person of color. About 50% of people who are killed by the police are people with disabilities. So as an organization, we're thinking about these things and thinking about how can we center Black disabled individuals in our work. There's a lot of really scary data around healthcare inequities for people with disabilities, and again, especially people of color who have disabilities. If you look at things like the median lifespan of a person with Down syndrome in our country, for a white person with Down syndrome, their lifespan is expected to be to 55 or older at this point because of some of the advances that have been made, especially around heart conditions among people who have Down syndrome. Unfortunately, a Black person with Down syndrome is expected to not live past about 25. And so some of the things that that are happening in our country are really exciting as a disability provider. The civil rights movement really paved the way for the ADA and for other movements that have benefited people with disabilities, especially myself as a white person with a disability. There is a lot that I do not encounter in the world because of the civil rights movement. And I have access to a lot of spaces because I am white. So I think as an organization, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of listening to happen. And I'm hoping that nonprofits are taking this time to look at structural inequities, barriers that we as nonprofits create for people who need our services. I think it's an exciting time. I think this specific time and place is I think the world is going to change. I hope it's going to change. I think it's an exciting time to be in the nonprofit space and to feel like you're a part of a movement that is creating access and eliminating some of the huge systemic barriers that have been built over hundreds of years. I don't know. I hope that's not too off topic or free ranging, but that's kind of where my head has been at.
Absolutely not. And I'm glad you said that stuff out loud. And those are the big things we want to talk about. I think a lot of us are in that very hopeful space, that this is a societal change. And also, thank you for raising up the point about how nonprofits have a role to play in addressing these inequities. So go ahead, Christina. Let's hear from you.
From the kind of the perspective of a local food movement, the inequity is twofold, and really none of it, or very little of it, has risen to public consciousness during the pandemic. And it's the first aspect is that the food distribution system is having problems, which that part is not a secret, just because of the lack of personnel to deliver food. That's based on a national kind of big ad distribution system. But the thing that people are reluctant to talk about is the fact that, most of the undocumented individuals who pick the food, you don't hear any sympathy for them because they're not protected. They're still out there picking the food. And, for as much as people kind of have a negative view about undocumented workers, darn tootin', their 15-year-old kid isn't going to be out there picking food 12 hours a day with the shade with no bathroom breaks. So those issues, I think, are still as untalked about as they were before the pandemic, maybe a little bit more. I may be being a little pessimistic about that. But the other issue is that which relates to a later question about policy making, is that, we really should stop subsidizing big ag food. People don't pay enough for food, and because of the agricultural subsidies, local food gets a bad rap as being too expensive when it's not at all. In fact, the other stuff is too cheap. Any kind of, and that creates a lot of inequity from a farmer standpoint, because farmers are about some of the poorest people so when they're charging more for their food, they're not gouging anyone. They're just trying to get something equitable for the work that they put into growing food. So in my dream world, we would go back to a place 100 years ago where people spent 25% of their income on food, because they were paying the farmer what they deserved versus the 10%, if that we have now, because, Dole is being subsidized by the federal government, or the Jolly Green Giant, and all those companies. So that kind of stuff really chaps me. And unfortunately, they're not highlighted on any sort of agenda because of the pandemic, as far as I'm concerned.
Good points. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Christina. I'll go ahead and send it to Robert to wrap us up today. And I want to remind everybody, if you still feel like it, we can end on a high note. You can still add your Gratitude Tuesdays. You can still add your contact information. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Mariah, and thanks, y'all. This has been really a great conversation. We'll end with our last question that we always ask. What can our community do for y'all today? And it sounds like there might be some things we can do. There might be some things we can't. But if there's anything we can help from home or help virtually, let us know. Jessie?
I feel like there are a couple things people can do. One, obviously, is donating to Mandy's farm and buying local foods. I think those are the two biggest things that you can do, is to take the money that you will be spending during this pandemic and directing it locally, and especially to Black-owned businesses. I think that those of us who don't have a lot of expendable income to make significant donations, those are ways that we can really impact our local community. In terms of our organization, another thing you can do is donate in-kind goods. Some of the things that I mentioned, like gloves, baby wipes, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and paper towels, all of those things are part of our normal day-to-day infrastructure, and they are harder to find than ever. It's been interesting to navigate things like we had a huge influx of donation of disinfectant, and we can't find paper towels anywhere. And so we were struggling, how do we use this if we have no cleaning materials? So we've been creative about that. And I would also encourage people to think about their local food banks and think about how you can bring something to the table for your community. Like I mentioned, organizations like Food is Free Albuquerque, they can help you harvest food that's being grown on your own property. If you have a great cherry tree or a peach tree or an apricot tree, or if you, like me, have an incredible zucchini crop that is just out of control, that food can be distributed to people in our community who really need it most. Right now, and normally I would say come and volunteer. Right now, because our organization is under different public health orders than the rest of the state, we are not able to accommodate volunteers. But we hope you guys will think of us in the future when some of those guidelines shift and we're able to start introducing volunteers back into our garden and back into our animal husbandry programs. So definitely don't forget about us, keep us in mind. But I think those are some of the biggest things you can do to support our work and just support people in the community at large.
Mariah, can I ask just one question? Like, it's not quite 10. Can I ask just one question?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll be super quick. I feel like for so many of us, we've been so overwhelmed, Jess and Christina, that it's like hard to even just there's so much going on with COVID, like homeschooling our kids and so many things that sort of haven't allowed us to maybe live the way we want to be living in our community. So I'm trying to make things as easy as possible for the people in my family, my brothers and everyone. If we wanted to like I don't even know what the situation is with local farmers markets and all that, other than what I randomly hear like on Facebook and coming from different directions. Is there one place where we can go to say, I want to buy local farm stuff this weekend or on Wednesday or whatever? Is there like a one-stop shop we can go to online or something that would tell us how to do
I just posted our website in chat, farmersmarketsnm.org. There's a market locator there, which includes farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and also grocery stores that sell locally grown food. But since and you can use search by location, and it'll give you the days and times and whatnot. But because the situation is so dynamic with COVID, you'll still need to contact each market individually because they all are independently operated to double check to see, what's going on with, something may have changed in the past week, that kind of thing. But just go to farmersmarketsnm.org, hit the market locator at the top of the page, and you'll be able to search for local food outlets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Christina, what can we do for y'all?
basically exactly what I just said. Go to farmersmarketsnm.org and look for your local food outlets and shop there. And I would also say that Jessie did a great job of summarizing other things that need to be done. I just echo what she said, that she did a much better job than I would have done. So
You both did tremendous jobs. Really appreciate your time this morning. And Trish, I just wanted to say, I think you still live downtown. If you go to the Borellis, the rail yards, they still do the pickup on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I'm mostly thinking of, because I do that and go to the co-op, but I'm mostly thinking of my family that doesn't live, that lives in different areas. And that's, of course, always a challenge for anyone that's not like right in the center of things. So,
Right.
So it's good to know about this, like, because it would be fun to like make a thing of it, like with my nieces, like we could do a trip to whatever one day. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much for continuing Impact and Coffee. Thank you, speakers. It's great.
you're on mute, buddy.
Yeah, I'm on mute, aren't I? Thanks everybody for joining us this morning, and thanks to Christina and Jessie for joining us. We're always happy to have you. And this is it for Impact and Coffee for July. We'll be back on August 7th, I believe. I think that's the first Tuesday. Is that the first Tuesday? It is. No, it's not. It's August. We'll be here on August 4th. So scratch that. That'll be our first Impact and Coffee of August. I know there'll be some things going on around that time. I know there's some conversations about schools reopening and what that looks like too. That's kind of been a hot mess. So if you're interested in that conversation, I know there's some folks online that might be talking about that here. But other than that, we wish everyone a really great rest of your week and a really great rest of your month. And we'll see you next time in August, and may all your lights be green. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.